Lowe's knows you've got a job to do, and we help get it done. With the MyLowe's Pro Rewards program, eligible members save more with volume discounts on qualifying orders through a quote of $2,000 or more. Join for free today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Offer can't be combined with any other discount, contract, and/or special pricing. Exclusions, more terms, and restrictions apply. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next-day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang or Angola 3. Die inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman, and today I'm going to jump right into it and cover with you the story of Corporal Betty Smothers, who was tragically murdered while working extra duty for the Baton Rouge Police Department at just 36 years old. And y'all, I remember this one distinctly. When this horrific incident occurred, I was a senior in high school. I was the same age as Betty Smothers' son, Warrick Dunn, who years later would play in the NFL and even win the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year award. He was an absolute stud on the field, and I knew firsthand because I played against Warrick Dunn when he was at Catholic High School and I was at Broadmoor High School in Baton Rouge. Now, I also had a lot of friends who were mutual friends with Warrick Dunn. I grew up in a neighborhood where many of my friends attended Catholic High School in Baton Rouge, and all of my friends would describe Warrick as good a person off the field as he was on the field. And that speaks to the way he was raised, and the full credit there goes to his mother, Betty Smothers. So let me tell you just a little bit about how amazing this woman was. At the time of her murder, Betty Smothers had 6 children, and these children ranged from the ages of 9 to the ages of 18, just shy of 18. Warrick Dunn was her oldest. He was weeks from being 18 years old. She had been a police officer for 14 years at this point with the Baton Rouge Police Department, and she was a single mother. She was doing all of this alone. Think about that. Her son Warrick, as I mentioned, he attended Catholic High School in Baton Rouge, which is a very respected private high school where to send your kids there, typically you had to be someone of some pretty affluent means. This was an expensive school. And this was where Warrick's athletic ability would play a key role. Warrick was even well known before high school. His athletic ability was very well known in the Baton Rouge area, and by the time he got to high school, Catholic High, they were more than happy to allow Warrick to attend the school tuition-free in exchange for him playing football for the Catholic High Bears. So think of it as a high school version of a scholarship. And Warrick, I'm sure, was one of very few to attend Catholic High without his parents even owning a home of their own in Betty Smothers' case. Which this fact would come into play a little bit later on in Warrick's life. As you can imagine, with 6 kids, single mother, and you're a police officer, you have to work a lot of overtime to make ends meet. And Corporal Smothers, she would do as much off-duty work as she could possibly get. So I'm going to take you back to January 7th of 1993. And Corporal Smothers is working a detail this night for a local grocery store. The grocery store closed, and the manager, escorted by Corporal Smothers, and they were both in her marked police car. They go to the night deposit of the bank to make the deposit. This was at 12:15 a.m. on January 7th, 1993. As soon as they pull up, a gunman appeared out of the dark shadows of the bank and fires several shots, hitting both the female grocery store manager as well as Corporal Betty Smothers. Corporal Smothers slumps over the steering wheel. But somehow, I would say it was an absolute miracle, the store manager, who has 11 bullet wounds, she manages to put the police car into gear and steer it away from the bank, which this totally foiled the robbery, as the gunmen, they did not pursue that vehicle. Corporal Smothers was shot 5 times, killing her. The grocery store manager was shot, as I said, 11 times. Many of the bullets hit Smothers and then would hit her too.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Her name was Kimen Lee. She was injured, but she survived the attack, just unbelievably. Police, they arrive at the scene, and it was determined from the spent shell casings, it was determined that 12 rounds were fired. One handgun fired 7, the other handgun fired 5, and they knew they were 2 different handguns because they were 2 different calibers. Now, earlier, when I described the scene, I used the term a gunman. And that was because the surviving victim, Miss Lee, she only saw one gunman. However, you have 2 different weapons here. And police, by this point, they were pretty certain at least 2 people were involved in this shooting. So the whole community in Baton Rouge, they were shocked by this, outraged by this. Corporal Smothers was beloved by everyone at BRPD and everyone who knew her outside of it. Her son Warrick was extremely well known, one of the top recruits in the country at this point. He was a senior in high school, and this became national news quickly. And right off the bat, seemingly everyone wanted to help these kids. A memorial fund was set up the very next day, and even the governor of the state of Louisiana at that time, Edwin Edwards, he kicked in $5,000 to the already $1,000 Crime Stoppers reward for information that would lead to the capture of those responsible. And this was a 14-year veteran of BRPD and the first officer to die in the line of duty in Baton Rouge in 5 years. Police wanted answers, and the community wanted answers. Now, the day after the shooting, and this is absolutely amazing to me considering her injuries, but the survivor, Kimen Lee, she undergoes hypnosis at the hospital, and she was able to provide police with enough detail for them to create a composite sketch of the suspect that she did see. Remember, she only saw one suspect. Then, just a day after that, a confidential informant, he tells a detective Denicola that someone by the name of Kevin Brumfield had killed Corporal Smothers, and that another guy by the name of Eddie Paul had information about it. So police, they pick up Eddie Paul and they bring him to the station for questioning. And he tells police that his cousin, West Paul, as well as Kevin Brumfield and someone that he only knew as AJ or Ray J, had committed the crime. So based off of this information, police, they get arrest warrants for both Kevin Brumfield and West Paul. And they are arrested, and this is on January 11th of 1993, which is just 4 days after the shooting in the murder of Corporal Smothers. Now, police are also looking through arrest records and rap sheets to determine if they have ever arrested someone with the street name of Ray J or DJ or AJ or anything like that to figure out who this guy is. And they come across a man by the name of Darren Brooks. And they show the photo of the guy to Eddie Paul. And they say, "Is this the guy you were calling Ray J?" And he says, "Yeah, that's the guy." So police get a warrant for Brooks. However, he's released from questioning rather quickly when it's discovered that he definitely could not have done this or been involved in it, because at the time this murder went down, he was in police custody. So they then focused their questioning on West Paul. Now, when he was arrested, as soon as police arrive at his door, his comment was, quote, "I knew y'all was coming." He also said, quote, "I didn't shoot no police officer." And this was before anyone had told him what they were there for. Also, they got from his residence a camouflage jacket that Kimen Lee, the survivor, had said the shooter was wearing the night of the shooting. Now, in the meantime, Kevin Brumfield's questioning was taking off. And initially, of course, he denies any involvement in anything. But under several hours of intense questioning, he confesses in a taped statement. So, according to his confession, he said that he and his friend, who he described as Smokey, which this was later determined to be West Paul, and a guy by the name of Henry Broadway, were driving around. They were looking to what he referred to as, quote, "hit a hustle," which he described as riding around looking for someone to rob. He said they were drinking and they somehow knew about the grocery store making these late night bank deposits. So they went to that bank and they hid in the bushes until Corporal Smothers and Miss Lee showed up to make the deposit that night. He said that he and Broadway jumped out of the bushes and Corporal Smothers saw them and that he panicked and he just started shooting, which he said made Broadway panic and he starts shooting. He said during this time, West Paul was around the corner in the car to serve as the getaway driver. And he said that after the shooting occurred, they jumped back in the car, freaking out, obviously. And he said they actually passed police officers heading to the scene as they were making their getaway. So at this point in the investigation, you have Brumfield admitting to killing Corporal Smothers, as well as implicating Henry Broadway in the shooting and the killing and implicating West Paul as the getaway driver. Now, in the questioning of these three, a lot was determined. First, a little over 24 hours prior to the murder, it was determined that Kevin Brumfield and Henry Broadway, they go to a psychic in the Baton Rouge area to obtain a tarot card reading. And it was during this reading that Brumfield, who according to the psychic was carrying a gun, said he planned to commit a robbery and he wanted to know the best day to do so, and would the cards tell him that? It also came out that the day after the murder, Brumfield told Eddie Paul, quote, "I just killed a sumbitch." Eddie Paul also said he heard Brumfield tell Broadway the murder was a waste of time because they didn't get any money out of it. Also coming out was that Broadway admitted to another robbery prior to that robbery in Clinton, Louisiana. So on February 14th, 1993, 20-year-old Kevin Brumfield, 22-year-old Henry Broadway, and 20-year-old West Paul, they enter pleas of not guilty in court, which of course means nothing. They don't have anything to lose. And in almost every case you'll ever hear about, they plead not guilty right out of the gate. And the prosecutor in this case, a legend, if you will, in the Baton Rouge area, Prim Burns, she announced she would be seeking the death penalty for all three of these individuals in this case. Now, shortly after this, it was also discovered that the informant who called in to police, this was none other than Eddie Paul himself. When the following article ran in a Baton Rouge newspaper over a month after those pleas were entered. And here's what the Advocate had to say. It starts, Eddie Paul just wanted to do what was right when he called police on January 10th, gave them a tip that led to arrest and the death of Baton Rouge Police Captain Corporal Betty Smothers. But doing the right thing landed him in an isolation cell and cost him his personal belongings, some disability pay, and peace of mind. Quote, "I never had so many headaches in all my life," Paul said. "I don't know what's going on. They made my life a living hell. I know that." Since calling police, Paul, who is 50, was arrested as a material witness and spent 5 weeks in a cell at Parish Prison, booked as a principal to first-degree murder in Smothers' death. He was released February 18th. While he was in prison, someone broke into his apartment. Quote, "They took everything I had," Paul said. "They left my 13-year-old daughter there by herself." Paul's daughter moved in with her mother. Paul, a disabled mechanic, moved to a new apartment. While he was in jail, the government discontinued his disability payments, but has since restored those, he said. Quote, "I don't sleep well at night," Paul said. "I'm back on medicine. I take nerve pills. Sometimes it looks like they don't even work." Paul's tip led police to 3 men who were indicted in February for first-degree murder. The 36-year-old officer was ambushed in her police car on January 7th and shot repeatedly. She was accompanying a grocery store manager to make a bank deposit. The manager was severely injured. Paul tipped police that Kevin Brumfield, 20, told Paul he had shot someone. Quote, "He didn't say who he shot," Paul said Monday as he waited to testify in pretrial hearings for Brumfield, Henry Broadway, and West Paul, his cousin. 3 days later, Brumfield had a gun and children were playing nearby, Paul said. Quote, "Kevin was hanging out around my house with a gun. That's why I called the police on him." Police investigating the complaint did not find Brumfield, but brought Paul in for questioning. Brumfield was later accused of shooting Smothers, Broadway of shooting her passenger, and West Paul of driving the getaway car. Paul said he knew nothing of the case other than Brumfield's comments. Quote, "They took me to jail for all that. From the day they locked me up, I didn't know what was going on." And that was an article by the Advocate released March 31st, 1993. So it takes a couple of years before this case goes to trial. And in the meantime, one of those charged, West Paul, the getaway driver, he cuts a deal with prosecutors. And that's not surprising, by the way. The prosecution was going to seek the death penalty against West Paul, and it's probably not something they were really going to do for the getaway driver. It'd be real hard to get a death penalty to stick against a getaway driver who didn't actually kill anybody. But Prim Burns, amazing prosecutor, and likely was using this to scare West Paul into cutting a deal, which he did. And that deal stated that in exchange for his testimony against Brumfield and Broadway, he would get 25 years and not life in prison, and certainly not the death penalty. So in July of 1995, a little over 2 years after the murder of Corporal Smothers and the attempted murder of Miss Lee, Kevin Brumfield and Henry Broadway, they go to trial. Now, during this trial, some key evidence comes out outside of the fact that these guys had confessed to several people about the murder. And most notably was the fact that the shell casings found at the scenes matched guns that were found with Brumfield and Broadway. Judge Ralph Tyson, he presided over the proceedings, and 200 prospective jurors were actually narrowed down to 12 for this trial. In the end, in early July of 1995, both Brumfield and Broadway are convicted of first-degree murder, and both get sentenced to death via lethal injection. Now, like the vast majority of stories I tell you, here's where the story really gets started. Of course, especially with death penalty cases, you expect most of the convicted are going to exhaust their appeals completely. Maybe they'll get lucky. Maybe a technicality is going to be found somewhere, whatever. So in Brumfield's case, his appeals really stood on one thing, and that was his mental capacity. Was consistently measured between 70 and 75, which would indicate a mental disability and cognitive impairment, which here's my opinion on this. You commit murder, this murder right here, and then you take steps to hide the fact that you murdered someone. That proves to me you knew murdering this amazing lady and damn near murdering another. You knew that was wrong, but you did it anyway. You weren't so mentally incapacitated you didn't know right from wrong. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been trying to hide it after the fact. So while all these appeals are going on and they're moving forward, so is the family of Corporal Smothers. Warrick, despite all the odds, I mean, this guy had to become a mama and a daddy overnight. In addition to going to college, he went on to become a major football star in college, playing for Florida State, much to my chagrin, because I'm an LSU Tiger guy. In 1997, he was drafted as the 12th overall pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he goes on to play in the NFL for 12 seasons. He made 2 Pro Bowls. He won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award and all kinds of other awards. Off the field, he was equally outstanding. He established the, quote, Home for the Holidays program, which assists single parents with down payments in fully furnished homes, which I can't think of a more amazing way to honor your single mother and everything that she did for her kids than by assisting other single parents with down payments for homes, because his mother could never afford a house. It just gives me chills thinking about it. He's helped over 300 families through that program. Now, in 2016, something I consider shocking occurred when Kevin Brumfield is resentenced from death row to life in prison after a court apparently disagreed with me and decided that his mental capacity was such that he couldn't get the death penalty. Warrick Dunn himself was against this. They felt he was too mentally disabled to be sentenced to death. Then in 2023, it was Henry Broadway's turn to try and get out of death row. And in a clemency hearing, famed lawyer Barry Scheck, you may remember him from the O.J. Simpson trial. He is also the founder of the Innocence Project, which is now a national nonprofit that fights to get people off death row that are innocent of crimes. And I have respect for that. And he has had several high-profile cases where people were exonerated by DNA, and it was through pushing for their innocence through that program. So I got nothing but love for that program. I think if someone is innocent, the last thing you obviously want to do is put them to death. And they've done some great things there. But here they're not fighting for someone that's innocent. And he spoke, of course, in defense of Broadway. But guess what? Warrick Dunn was there. Warrick Dunn's sister was there. Many people were there. And Warrick Dunn, he was having none of this. And you have absolutely got to hear this in its entirety. This is the clip from the hearing for Henry Broadway when he was seeking clemency. And you're going to hear Warrick Dunn speaking to the Louisiana Pardon Board. You're going to hear his sister. You're going to hear the former chief of police, BRPD's Greg Ferries. And you're going to hear the decision of the board after they make their comments. So here's that clip.
First, we'd like to hear from the victim's family. Mr. Dunn, could we hear from you, sir?
Yes, ma'am. This is, it's heartbreaking because, I understand individuals go to prison, wrongly convicted. I do understand that. In this situation, that's not the case. And it's really disrespectful. And I'm over here getting emotional listening to, nonsense, not even understanding that if someone is shot and killed your family members, they come to your front door, you're not going to have that perspective. And then if you think about it, we have police officers that are supposed to be protecting us, serving and protecting. And all of a sudden now we got a guy who's been on death row for 30 years. He's able to get up every day, eat 3 meals, call his family, and what? My kids, my brothers and sisters' kids, grandkids won't be able to meet their grandmother. They don't have that experience of, the value she could have added to their life. And then everyone wants to talk about, because I play professional football and, I help families. Well, I'm not able to do the things that I do for other individuals because my mom is not here. She sacrificed her life to protect people. And to listen to this nonsense. This is nonsense about an individual who has been convicted, not innocent. And also, I heard in the past, he put a gun to another lady's head and it jammed. No one talks about that. It's just frustrating because people are sacrificing their lives, and the police officers, we let someone off death row, let some clemency, this or that. Any individual in this country would go around thinking they could just kill and shoot people, and their consequences is that I'm just going to spend the rest of my life in prison, and I can eat 3 meals a day, spending taxpayers' dollars. Please. It's just disrespectful. And I oppose, these two individuals, everyone who's opposing that, he needs clemency, that he needs to be off death row or out of, I oppose that. And, I know my sister, I don't know if she's able to talk, but she can also express herself in a way that, my younger sister didn't have her mother, 9 years old. You think she could have been a better woman today than she is now? Yes, my sister could have. So you guys don't understand anything. And go out, defend people. I don't want innocent people to die and lose their life. I'm all about that. But in this case, don't commit me and my family who suffered all these years. Because at 18 years old, I had to become a father. And I took care of my brothers and sisters because that's what my mom trained me to do over the years, because we couldn't afford a house. We couldn't afford this and that. We were surviving.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Yes,
ma'am. Summer Smothers, or would you like to say a few words? There you go. You're still on mute.
I'm sorry, I'm in the car trying to drive. Ride. We ride somewhere, so I apologize.
Okay, is there something you'd like us to know?
Yes, just to piggyback off my brother, I did write a speech and just wanted to make you guys aware as we reflect on this 30-year journey without our mother. We are constantly reminded that we have a hole in our hearts that will never be filled. The pain won't stop and some memories fade, but the constant flashback of January 7, 1993 remains. The worst part of it all, I remember it like it was yesterday. Each year getting harder and harder to process. We all have grown up with kids of our own, which makes this part of life most difficult to bear. People often ask, how do you heal from something like this? I reply, you never heal. You always be broken. You always wonder what life could have been if she was still here. But instead, we constantly try to explain to our kids who our mother was. Have you ever imagined trying to explain to a child what a cemetery looks like while she's not there, not here with us? Or when they ask to see their grandmother, you have to take them to a burial plot, a tombstone that can't speak words of comfort back or give them reassurance that everything is okay. Have you ever opened a piece of mail and thought you'd seen a ghost, asking yourself, why does God keep punishing us? We all received a letter from this attorney office back in April, not knowing not one of us told the other one that we had received this letter because it was going to open a door that we all tried to keep closed. Within 30 years, we have never had anyone from the defendant's side check up on us. But what amazed us, as soon as Governor Edwards announced he was against the death penalty, the office engaged a defense victim outreach specialist to inform us of the new development in the case. We started trying to place pieces together. We made phone calls to figure out what was going on, and that's when we was informed of Broadway petition to appeal. Once again, how can you ever heal from something if it's a revolving door? Our family has been through so much, and another, we just devastating to the families. This not only affects us, but our kids, who now try to process what's going on, learning about the unspoken, unfiltered truth of our mother's death that we try to protect them from. They never knew the impact of our mom's death had on us. They just thought, I'm sorry. Somebody called. They just started trying to place pieces together, make a phone call to figure out what's going on. I'm sorry. Our family has been through so much, and another, just devastating to our families. This not only affects us, but we're trying to process what's going on, learning the unspoken truth of our mother's death. They just started trying to notice the trends and behavior when it comes to certain things and milestones. As I close, I want you guys to understand the hurt, the pain, and love that I can't get back. Imagine yourself at 14 being woken up to the news that your mother was shot and killed, not because she was doing anything wrong, but because she was serving and protecting the citizen of Baton Rouge. Now you and your sibling has to figure out life. Who's going to provide for you? Where you going to live? Are we going to be able to stay together? All while prepping to bury your only parent you have. But we accept the fact that Mr. Broadway continues to breathe life, get 3 meals a day, continues to have conversation and see his family, a privilege that we can't experience and haven't experienced for the last 30 years. But we have to talk to the tombstone that don't speak back. When will we be allowed?
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you wrap it up for us, please?
Yes, ma'am. I'm finishing up. When will we be allowed to feel like the system isn't broken and hears our cries? All we want is justice that's overdue, and I don't have the luxury to know what a true mother loves feel like. I'm opposed to this petition for appeal for clemency. This is something that we deal with all the time, and we just on my behalf and my sister and brothers, we're opposed to this clemency petition.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Ms. Lee? Yes. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I have been silent for far too long, almost 31 years to be exact. And not to take anything away from Betty, God rest her soul, but I lived in the shadows. When this tragedy is talked about, I'm not even spoken of. I have, however, been living this every single day of my life. January 7th will be 31 years ago this happened. This tragic event took everything from me. I live with survivor's guilt, and at times it's more than I can bear. In the past, I've lived in fear. I would look out my window and feel so hopeless, sad, and depressed. Never saw the glass half full. Not long after everything happened, I found myself locked up in a mental hospital for 3.5 weeks. I tried to heal and move on with my life, but it felt impossible. I saw a therapist for over 3 years. I couldn't understand why this happened to me. How could anyone do this? As time passed, I learned to pick myself up and try to move forward. Every day was a challenge. I live every day of my life with PTSD. I will for the rest of my days on earth. My coworkers, my friends, my family, my neighbors know never to walk up on me without my full attention, because it sends me into a dark place of fear and anxiousness. Please understand, by you doing this brings pain into all of our lives. We will never give back what was taken from us. I ask and I beg of you, please do not do this. One life was lost and several lives were changed forever. By reducing the sentence from death to life imprisonment, you are diminishing the atrocity of what was done to us. Betty died, her children's lives changed forever. I lived with this my whole life. Our lives mean more than this. And I will say, without any certainty, I know who I identify. And I stand tall and 100% certain I know the man that I saw that night, on that rainy night, was Andre Broadway, without any doubt in my mind. And I beg of you, please don't do this. We've lived in pain for so long. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Daniels?
I stand before you in opposition. My name is Daniel. I represent the Baton Rouge Police Department as Chief of Staff. I think this is one of those events that we grew up in Baton Rouge where you were when you heard that it occurred. I also not a police officer at that time, but over the last 25 plus years in our agency, I get to watch and see that the time still hadn't healed. This is still one of the most common topics discussed in our police department, and we're still assisting a lot of our officers who were there or who were friends or who actually responded to the scene that night because they're still in the healing process. We're in great opposition of this request. We ask that you please deny it. And again, we pray for the family, law enforcement, as well as personally.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ferris?
I'm fair judge. I'm Brett Ferris. I was the police chief in 9th grade and take just a moment to address Mr. Sherry's comments. Every confidence this investigation was done correctly. Conviction was correct. He was correct side. And Mr. Broadway is where he is because he did what the state's accused of doing. We just very strongly recommend that. Any killing of a police officer is one of the most heinous crimes that can be committed because it is an attack on civilization. It's an attack on the people to keep civilization, that veneer of civilization we have in place. Many killings of police officers, or what I would call unpopular. Somebody who's mentally deranged, or maybe a police officer responds to a domestic issue, violent domestic issue, where emotion is all at their peak. He or she gets shot and killed. This was an ambush. This was 3 people trying to set up an ambush behind the bank of Jefferson Highway and try to kill Successfully one, unsuccessful the second. Killed 2 people to commit an armed robbery. It's about as bad as it gets in the way of killing of Muslims. Premeditated, pre-planned, and tragically executed quite soon. I cannot speak with the authenticity of Warrick or Summer, but let me take you back. So I said in my letter, the day after killing, January 1993, Tom Ednick, he and I went to their very modest house, Baton Rouge. We walked in the building. There's a young man sitting in a chair on the right, holding a child in his lap, stroking its head, and comforting the child. Walked in. He said, I kissed him. Kissed the child, said, you can only look back. I better talk to Miss Jim. That, of course, is important. He has been an incredibly successful human being, incredibly successful man, high school, college, and pro star, running back, 108 pounds, a philanthropist, author. He has accomplished a lot, but what he does not have, never have, is the ability to give his mother house, to comfort her in her old age, to be with her. She passes away at the age of 85. Never happened. It's Broadway with 2 other people, drive an ambush, steal some money, and kill 2 people. Continue to kill 2 people. I find January 1990. They succeeded in taking Betty Smothers' life. Almost succeeded in taking Kimen's. Broadway has been through trial, it's been through appeals, all the way up, I believe, certainly Louisiana, I think the U.S. Supreme Court. And however far that process has been, that conviction has been affirmed. I have no reason to support Mr. Sheck's intention that this was a bad investigation or a bad conviction. I instructed my then chief of detectives, Don Bull, that this had to be done absolutely right. That this was a killing of a police officer, the most sensational crime that happened in Baton Rouge since January 1972. And it had to be done right, and holding him responsible as chief of detectives. 3 days later, he was in office. Ran out of time. Yes, somebody check. He had been out the whole time, supervised it 100%. Advised looked like a road map in Chicago and said, go home and get some sleep. You got this. For the Baton Rouge Police Department, and more so for Betty's family, I have been strong opposition to this. There's not to be.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Moore, Ms. Barbera, I'll turn it over to y'all. Good morning. Good morning to all of you, just checking. I listened to all these statistics from exonerations and savings. I just need to set the record straight right now that when we have an offender who's going to post-conviction relief in federal court, and the judge determines that there is a degree of intellectual disability that would mean that person cannot be executed, and we enter into a contract for life, and that person spends the rest of his life in general population in Angola, that is not an exoneration. And it is extremely offensive that these anti-death penalty zealots, they have the right to their opinion. I disagree with it, but they have the right to their opinion. But don't misrepresent the statistics.
And I hear no mention of the cases where additional DNA testing is ordered, and it in fact further confirms the victim's eyewitness identification of the rapist, one we had just a few years ago in East Baton Rouge Parish. So yes, it's real easy to focus on the cases where DNA may have exonerated people, and we can throw out names, but let's not talk anymore about those cases. Let's talk about the fact that Kimen Lee, by the grace of God, was here to speak to you this morning. Let's talk about the fact that, as retired Chief Ferry said, civilization is completely disrupted when someone decides to kill a law enforcement officer, someone who takes their life into their hands every day. This was not a domestic violence situation. We have unfortunately lost law enforcement in our community to that. This is a man who plotted with his co-defendant to commit this armed robbery. This is a man who, during his time at Angola, he filed complaints because his sex novel wasn't delivered timely, or he didn't know the method of execution. He waited to start taking classes. I think Living in Balance just started in 2023. This is a man who testified in his defense at trial and didn't just say, I am innocent. He alleged that Kimen Lee was in on this, that this was an inside job. It doesn't get much more offensive than that. As Mr. Lampert said, we sincerely appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you at this phase of the process. It is unprecedented, and we thank you for that. This individual is not intellectually disabled. There are still post-conviction relief proceedings pending as we speak in federal court. This, ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully submit to you, is not the forum to litigate this claim of innocence. The United States Supreme Court denied cert in this case. It is now post-conviction relief proceedings. Let that be litigated. There is not a death warrant in this case. Henry, however you pronounce his first name, Broadway, is not condemned. They are proclaiming innocence. They obviously are seeking release into our population, not general population at Angola. That man wants to be walking the streets with you, me, Myron Daniels, Dave Mays, Clarence McGarner, retired Chief Ferries, Hiller Moore, Kimen Lee. And God forbid the rest of the Smothers family, or some or the rest of them. Let this work itself out in federal court. This conviction has been upheld. There have been evidentiary hearings in district court. I believe there were 5 separate hearings, days in front of the Honorable Ralph Tyson, committing someone to the federal court. To grant a clemency hearing for this man would just be one step further. And we all know he will not be satisfied in general population. He wants out. On behalf of the family, on behalf of law enforcement, we ask that you please deny his request for release. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, did you want to speak?
It's all good for more than so. Yeah, for what they for the year and Bonnie Jackson, one of the best judges that get around, and all the other gentlemen. So we expect the position here in a tough position. And Judge Marabella, I understand your folks and why you do what you're doing. I get it. You are pride in them. And this case is a little unique, a little different. I only wanted to speak about the manner in which these folks were notified about what was going to happen. And that it is really offensive they received a letter in the mail from a law office representing the defendant. And in that letter, it said that we have hired a special victims counsel for you. They don't work for us, they work for you. Read my letter, and please call my office and get you in touch with your victim representative. When they got that letter, Warrick Dunn called me and said, what in the hell is going on? We obviously had no idea. And on that day, all of these petitions were filed en masse at one time. Obviously, something had been in plans for a very long time, and no notice was given to us other than that letter. And I can tell you that over the years, the number of times that I've had to call Mr. Dunn, sometimes he answers, sometimes it takes time because he wants to know what's happening now. I could see it in his face, I could hear it in his voice. This is killing him, his family, and all the other families that we've seen it before. And I know that put you guys in such a difficult position. You have a tough job to do. We work respectfully request that you ignore this consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, so. Okay, there's no other comments to be made, so I think we're to vote. We'll start with Mrs. Jackson.
First, I'd like to thank everyone who participated today. Very important. For me, one thing that's really important for me is consistency in how I did things as a judge. I tried to be even-handed in every case that I had because it's important. I think that goes a long way to ensuring justice as well as confidence in the system. With that being said, this board sets certain guidelines for consideration of clemency application. Mr. Broadway, in his application, meets those requirements, just as any other applicant would. And granting a hearing is not insurance in any way of relief. It's just you put a process in place, and I believe when you put a process in place, you should follow that process. Another thing that concerns me in this case is that there were 3 people involved in this terrible crime. All 3 of them equally as culpable. Every single one of them. And yet, Kevin Rumfield, who is clearly acknowledged as being the person who actually killed Officer Smothers, will not ever be executed. There's a claim of intellectual disability, but as I read the police reports, time and time, his name came up as the main actor, the mastermind, and yet he is not facing execution. Westfall, equally as culpable, pled to attempted armed robbery, received a 25-year sentence. The only person facing execution is Henry Broadway. I will tell you that troubles me. That troubles me. And so, because he meets the requirements for a hearing, and because of my concern about the inconsistency of the outcomes in these cases, my vote would be to grant a hearing.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Rouge.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A lot of the information troubles me also. But under the Louisiana Code, Title 22, Section 5, states there are 8 reasons why I could deny an application. And I'm just going to mention a couple of those. The serious nature, the egregious nature of the crime, And there's no more heinous crime than the murder of a police officer. Even if that person is not directly responsible for it, he participated in a felony that resulted in the death of a police officer and a seriously wounding of an assistant manager of a supermarket store in the progress of doing their job. The second reason that I'm going to use is his supervision history. Mr. Broadway has been on supervision on 2 different occasions. Both of those occasions, he was terminated unsatisfactorily simply because he had other felonies or misdemeanor convictions. And knowing what I know after listening to Ms. Lee, the express opposition in the victim's family, Mr. Dunn and his sister Summer, the adamant opposition from the Louisiana State Troopers Association and the Attorney General of the state of Louisiana, Baton Rouge law enforcement, and the DA's office in East Baton Rouge, who is adamantly opposed to hearing this based upon the trauma that it could and would inflict on the victim's family. I have no other choice than to deny and reject this application based on information that I have. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Mr. Maribel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to thank everybody for being here. Certainly the victims in this case, the victim's family. As Mr. Moore pointed out, I've got a lot of friends involved in this case. This is an extremely difficult case. This is an administrative hearing to determine if this inmate meets eligibility requirements for a full hearing. At this hearing, we have allowed public comments of those in favor and those who are opposed to a recommendation for a full hearing. As a member of this pardon board, I think it's important to note that every sector of the criminal justice system has its own obligations and responsibilities. Law enforcement has their responsibilities and their obligations. I can tell you, my 50 years in the criminal justice system, I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. Prosecutors have their obligations and responsibilities. I respect them. I was a prosecutor, and I believe and I hope that I honorably carried out those responsibilities. I respect the defense lawyers for the job that they do. I was a defense lawyer. I hope that I honorably carried that out. Judges have their responsibility in this system. I was a judge, and I hope that I honorably carried that out. Legislators also have their obligation and responsibility. And the pardon board has its obligations and responsibilities as well. And there are different. And I hope when this is all said and done and I'm off this board that I can honestly say I honorably carried out what I believe to be my obligation. On the pardon board, our responsibilities, duties, and obligations are to consider all of the circumstances and factors involved. We do not retry cases. We do not find fault with the prosecution, jurors, or the courts. We do look at the facts of the crime. We certainly look at the effects upon the victims and their families. And clearly, the pain, the grief, the suffering that they have endured is unimaginable. While considering all of these factors, our primary duty and responsibility is to look at the inmate today. Who was he when he committed this horrible crime nearly 31 years ago? How, if in any way, has he changed in the last 30 years of incarceration? Who is he today? I think it's important to point out that we are not being asked to release this inmate. We are being asked to consider granting this inmate an opportunity to have a hearing to determine if he merits a recommendation from this board to the governor to change his sentence from death to life without parole. This is what this hearing is about. After reviewing the entire record, including public comments, comments of those in favor and the comments of those opposed, after nearly 31 years served, he is classified as a low risk. He's got a good disciplinary record, 9 write-ups in 31 years. He has a good overall institutional record. My vote is that this inmate does meet the eligibility. My vote would be to grant the hearing.
Mr. Mayor Ballard, Mr. Freeman.
Okay, a lot has been said this morning. First off, I want to thank everyone for showing up today. It is hard. I'm sorry that the Dunn family has to keep reliving this every time something changes in our laws or every time they try to change the way things are looked at. But there is a process that we look at. This is a capital murder. A capital murder of a police officer, which there's no way they can say didn't know she was a police officer. She was in her unit. Miss Lee, they meant to kill you. There's no doubt in my mind. They meant to kill you also. And so I look at that process. A capital murder deserves more looking at than less. And you should have to do more to be eligible for relief in a capital murder case. And so that's my process. And my vote is to deny.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I have reviewed, this process was a little different than what we usually do for administrative review. We had a lot more information to look at than we usually do. After considering all that, I note that Mr. Broadway's case was affirmed, as has been mentioned, by the Supreme Court. His sentencing conviction was affirmed over 24 years ago in 1999. He has no death warrant. He does have post-conviction pending in federal court. And after listening to Ms. Lee and Mr. Dunn and the Smothers family, I cannot vote to move this application forward to a hearing and put these people through that again. So my vote today is to deny the application for a clemency hearing. Mr. Broadway's received 2 favorable votes to move forward. He's received 3 votes to deny his application to move forward. So today his application for a clemency hearing is denied.
So there you have it. Denied. I love it. I think that's the right decision. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if you were as upset as I was when one of those parole board members said, oh, well, there's, the other guy got off and I understand got off because of his mental capacity, and maybe your mental capacity is not such, but there's so many, and I'm paraphrasing here, twists and turns to this case that you should also get off of death row. What is wrong with people? I'm sorry. That's shocking to me. Where is that lady's heart? And that was a female. She knows what it's like. I'm assuming she was maybe a mother. If she was, you know what it's like to be a mother? And you still fight for this guy that killed someone and gravely injured another? It's horrible. But there you have it. Clemency denied, and Henry Broadway, to this day, remains on death row. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, commercial-free early releases, and more. Patreon.com/Bloody Angola Podcast. And until next time, for Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang or Angola